timeline was going to be and how much time you were going to dedicate before you said, okay, enough. Um, I'm wondering if you could kind of share with our listeners, despite that you probably didn't have to worry so much about like, okay, I have 50 grand, how do I stretch it,
Yeah.
to build my MVP and get someone to take me seriously. But just more broadly, I mean, what are some of the efficiencies that you perhaps even still use today, whether it be about time management, whether it be about leadership or resource management? I mean, I think that sometimes people think about hacking as a way to kind of bootstrap something,
Hmm.
but I tend to look at it slightly differently. I tend to think of it more as a lifestyle, which is, there's no greater resource than your time
Yep.
because you want to be able to enjoy your time, whether it's with your kids or with your friends or with yourself. And you don't want to be wasteful of it. So so it's an area that really fascinates me in how people approach their lives, sometimes in a much more efficient way.
So time is, yes, I will answer your question. The thing that's really important to understand is that time is the only constant variable. It is the
Mm.
variable that you cannot change. And early in my career, I did the math and I figured out that essentially there are only, I didn't do the math on how many hours in a day, but what I figured out pretty early in my career is that I should go as far as I possibly could up the corporate ladder because time is a constant variable. It is unchanging, which means that I can change how much I earn, but like you can only ever work so many hours in a day. There are only ever 24 hours in a day. So I should try and make as much money as I possibly could within that time bound. So,
Hmm.
and that was a very much a constant. The things that I think a lot of my corporate experience helped me with pipeline, and I was able to take the things in terms of operational efficiency and structure that I had built and implement those at pipeline. So we actually have a very consistent structure across our company where, for instance, we have internal meetings on Monday. Tuesdays are meetings that we have with our external vendors. I try not to have as many meetings on Wednesday and Thursday because you always have this really long to-do list, and then you can actually get through some of those things. And then Friday, we look at sales and those kind of things, but then also we have other meetings. And I think having that very standard structure really helped us to measure what we were doing, but also helped people to have a sense of predictability, particularly in a startup that is very, very unpredictable. Startups are not like large companies, right?
No.
You don't have economies of scale. You can live and die by one deal and whether or not it's closed. And so this sense of reliability really helped. One of the things that we do at Pipeline is we look at our metrics through the lens of the customer. What is the customer journey? And so we look at those, kind of typically in terms of top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, customer success, implementations, product development. And those are actually KPIs that we measure, and we look at them every single week. And only one person owns a KPI. And so I think there's a very scalable but consistent structure and metrics to those structure that has helped us be very consistent in our approach. I mean, that's certainly one thing that we have done in terms of hacking time, if you will.
Yeah.
I keep a very structured to-do list in terms of what can I actually get done on different days. And I know what those things are based on how many meetings I have and how many white space I have and how much white space I have in my calendar. It doesn't mean that I'm not flexible with those things, but I think that consistency has actually helped us quite a bit. And then I think the other thing for us, particularly in a startup, is having the folks who have the right mindset. Being in a startup is really, it's not what you read about in TechCrunch or, VentureBeat. It's very different. And there are people who like the idea of being in a startup, but not really the reality of being in a startup, which is very different. And so we have gotten very good at being able to test and identify folks who can actually fit in a startup structure, not just pipeline, but sort of generally what it's like to be in a startup, versus kind of like the idea of being a startup, but may not be willing to change hats, right? So, at Pipeline, you could do many different things in a given day, right? You're not, and so I think that's the other thing, right? You could be a customer success, and then you're on sales, and then you're working on tech implementation, whatever that is. And so we've gotten very good at who are the people who maybe this is your primary role, but I might need you to step into something else. And you're willing to do that because you understand the bigger purpose of what you're doing. And I certainly have had some failures in that regard, but we've gotten very good at doing that.
And do you find any, and I wouldn't say any regrets, but have there been any big surprises for you when you headed down this path and you thought, oh, this is going to be great because I'll be able to do this, or this is going to be really hard? Were there any surprises, good or bad?
It's interesting. The thing that I have an MBA. I mentioned that I was a global vice president before I launched Pipeline, and had a very successful corporate career. I knew that it would be harder to raise money as a female founder, but I thought, well, I'm smart. I have an MBA. I can read the books. I've got a pretty good pedigree in terms of my corporate experience. It'll be hard, but it won't be as hard. And I was totally wrong about that. I was completely wrong about that. I had no idea how hard it is to raise money as a female founder. I mean, it's hard to raise money for anyone, but in particular for female founders. And that has been a total, talk about growing your grit muscle. That has been grit and reframing. And I think that has been definitely a surprise and something that I have certainly, I don't think I have it all figured out, but I've gotten much better at it over the first 3.5 years. I was talking to a Techstars cohort a few weeks ago that they're brand new startups. And I said to them, I think back to my first pitch deck, and it's super embarrassing. I'm like, oh my gosh. And they talk about, it's like walking around with jam on your face, and I had a good friend who was in Silicon Valley, and he and I had actually done some work together when I was in the corporate world. And I said, oh, great. Well, I'll pitch him, and and he's like, he said to me, Katica, that's the jankiest demo I've ever seen. And I appreciate, it was, certainly a bit of an ego blow for me, but I appreciated the folks who were willing to, give me feedback, and it certainly made me better. And I mentioned Techstars, we're a Techstars company, and I've been so grateful for that experience and to be involved with them, because they've been so helpful, both in the times when I needed to pick myself up off the floor and, soldier on, if you will, but also in the celebrations of all the really great things that we've had.
What do you think was kind of a pivoting point for you in terms of the capital raising? Do you think it was just a matter of time and number of meetings, or was there a new strategy, new approach, a new you when you landed that deal?
The thing that I think two things that I would say. One is it's really good to get somebody who is not involved in the day-to-day business of your company. So for instance, we work with the managing director at Techstars to help you frame your capital raise. I would definitely, if you're a startup, try and get somebody who's an advisor, who's either raised money themselves. So most of the managing directors in Techstars actually came from being founders themselves, but somebody who really understands that world on both sides, both as an entrepreneur and as a venture capitalist, and can really help you see what you have. I think one of the things that can be very pronounced in the startup world is, we talk about imposter syndrome, right? But in the startup world, that's like imposter syndrome on steroids, because you're getting rejected from everybody, right? You're doing well if you talk to 10 investors and you get one yes. That's actually a good thing. That's actually better.
That's actually excellent. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, it's excellent. So you have to, and that's and that's what you have to be really be ready for. And so the thing that I learned was, one, to talk to folks who, really those trusted advisors who could help me think through this, folks I could also call when I was just having a really bad day. But the other was that it is largely a confidence game. Like
Yeah.
raising money is kind of like, markets, public markets, the Dow Jones, New York Stock Exchange, like they like confidence, right? When there's confidence in the economy, the market goes up. And
Right.
that's very similar to raising money. One of my fellow female founders who is phenomenal at raising money, she's also someone I go to, and she's great. But she recommended to me this book called Mastering the VC Game. And
Oh,
that
great.
actually has, yeah, that's actually been really, really helpful.
Okay, great. I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, we are so out of time, and I wish I had another 30 minutes because we could go on. So I wanted to thank you so much for being on Startup Hacks today. Your story and your insights are so helpful to listeners, and I'm sure they really enjoyed everything that you had to share. So if they would like to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, is there a website you could direct them to or contact?
Yeah, if you want to see more about my work, you can actually go to katicaroy.com, KATICAROY.com. And information about both myself and Pipeline is there, as well as the ability to contact me.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you again. And tune in next week for more startup hacks. We have another great show that you won't want to miss on the secret female founder strategies that can save you time and money when you're building your business. This podcast is brought to you by Women Entrepreneurs Global, the first startup studio and digital do-it-yourself platform for women. For more information on our guests, this podcast, and many other female founder programs, please visit womenentrepreneurs.global. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina, and we will see you next week. Thank you for joining Startup Hack. Tune in next week for more interviews. We have another great show you won't want to miss on the secret female founder strategies that can save you time and money when building your business. This podcast is brought to you by Women Entrepreneurs Global, the first startup studio and digital do-it-yourself startup platform for women. For more information on our guests, this podcast, and many other female founder programs, please visit womenentrepreneurs.global. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. See you next week.